It was a bright, humid Saturday morning in the suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, where freshly mowed lawns stretched in neat rows and mailboxes lined the streets like clockwork. The Johnson family, a black family in their late 30s, had recently moved into the neighborhood, and their arrival had stirred more than a little curiosity. Marcus and Lisa Johnson, both accomplished professionals, had purchased the house after years of saving and planning, finally achieving a dream of living in a safe, welcoming community close to good schools and reliable transportation. They moved in with their two children, ages 10 and 7, arranging furniture and hanging pictures, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents of prejudice bubbling quietly among some of the long-term residents. As they unpacked boxes on the front lawn, a neighbor, a middle-aged white woman named Karen Matthews, stepped onto her porch, arms crossed, her expression tight. "Do you really think you belong here?" she asked sharply, her voice carrying a tone of thinly veiled condescension. A few other neighbors gathered behind her, whispering to one another, casting glances filled with suspicion and judgment. Marcus paused in the middle of lifting a box, offering a calm, polite smile. "We purchased the home, just like anyone else," he said evenly. "We're happy to be part of the neighborhood." Karen huffed, muttering under her breath, but her words were loud enough for Lisa to hear. "We'll see about that." The morning unfolded with a series of passive-aggressive encounters. Mailboxes were questioned, lawn care critiqued, and small comments about community traditions made with a sharp edge. The Johnsons remained composed, responding politely when necessary, but mostly focused on their family, their unpacking, and settling into a home they had earned. Other neighbors whispered among themselves, glancing at the newcomers with suspicion, unaware of the quiet dignity and patience the Johnsons carried, and the fact that their resilience and accomplishments were far greater than the petty judgments being cast. By afternoon, a small group of neighbors had gathered near the sidewalk, whispering and commenting about the family's supposed unfamiliarity with local customs and questioning how they could afford such a home. Marcus, catching sight of the group, calmly walked over and introduced himself. "Good afternoon, I'm Marcus Johnson, and this is my wife Lisa," he said, gesturing toward their smiling children. "We're looking forward to being neighbors and contributing positively to the community." The group hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances, their earlier confidence tempered by the polite authority of the Johnsons. The first day in Maplewood ended with quiet reflection for the family. They had faced subtle hostility, but had handled it with patience, dignity, and grace. Unseen by most, they were not just moving into a neighborhood. They were quietly establishing the standard that would reshape perceptions, demonstrating that ownership, success, and respect were earned, and that arrogance and prejudice would be met with calm authority rather than conflict. The next morning, the Johnsons continued unpacking and organizing their new home, the sun casting a warm glow over the freshly painted exterior and neatly trimmed lawn. Lisa carried boxes of kitchenware into the house, while Marcus adjusted furniture in the living room, the children darting between rooms with excitement. Across the street, Karen Matthews and a small group of neighbors lingered near their own porches, whispering and shooting glances that were equal parts curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. Marcus noticed their presence but did not acknowledge them directly. He understood that patience and dignity were far more effective than confrontation, and that their behavior was rooted in assumptions that would be corrected through observation rather than argument. Throughout the morning, subtle acts of harassment continued. One neighbor left a note questioning whether the Johnsons were familiar with neighborhood rules. Another commented on the children's playful laughter, as if it disrupted some imagined standard. Marcus calmly collected the notes, placed them aside, and continued directing the children and helping unpack boxes. Lisa spoke to the kids about being proud of their new home, explaining that the opinions of those who judge unfairly are not what defines them or their family's place in the community. The children listened attentively, sensing their parents' calm authority and absorbing the unspoken lesson in dignity and composure. By early afternoon, Marcus decided to introduce himself formally to the neighbors who had gathered. He walked across the street with a confident but non-confrontational stride, extending his hand to each of them. "Good afternoon, I'm Marcus Johnson, and this is my wife Lisa. We're your neighbors now, and we hope to contribute positively to the community." The group exchanged uneasy glances, their previous smug expressions replaced with subtle discomfort. The polite confidence of the Johnsons created an unspoken tension. The laughter and judgment they had relied upon suddenly felt hollow in the face of calm authority. Later, as the family returned to arranging furniture, they overheard snippets of conversation from the group of neighbors. "Did you know they actually bought the houses?" One whispered nervously, and another added, "I thought this was different." The words were quiet, but Marcus caught them. He smiled inwardly, knowing the patience, composure, and quiet strength they had demonstrated were beginning to reshape perceptions, teaching a lesson that would resonate far more than any argument or confrontation could. By the end of the day, the Johnsons had made progress not only in settling into their home, but in establishing a presence that commanded respect, demonstrating that ownership, dignity, and self-assurance cannot be dismissed or undermined by prejudice. By midweek, the Johnsons had settled into a rhythm, unpacking, organizing, and establishing their household while maintaining a calm and composed presence in the neighborhood. The subtle harassment continued, though now it was quieter, almost tentative. Karen Matthews and a few other neighbors whispered among themselves, casting sidelong glances at the family, questioning minor details like the way the lawn was trimmed or the angle of a curtain. Marcus and Lisa ignored the comments, focusing on their home and children, confident that their diligence, kindness, and composure would speak far louder than the whispers and judgment of a few resentful neighbors. One afternoon, Lisa took the children to the nearby park, where a few neighbors had gathered casually. As the family approached, some of the onlookers exchanged smirks, clearly expecting discomfort or tension. Instead, Lisa smiled warmly and greeted them politely. "Good afternoon," she said evenly, her voice calm yet authoritative. "We hope to be good neighbors and enjoy this community together." The pause that followed was telling. The group's smirks faltered, replaced by subtle unease as they realized that the Johnsons were unshakable, polite, and unflinching in their demeanor. The children ran and laughed in the background, adding to the image of a family rooted in confidence, joy, and self-assurance, leaving the neighbors unsure how to respond to their composure. Later that evening, Marcus returned from work to find a small crowd of neighbors lingering near the sidewalk, whispering in low tones. He approached with calm, deliberate steps, acknowledging each of them with a nod, but not directly confronting their chatter. "Good evening," he said, voice steady and composed. "We appreciate the opportunity to be part of this neighborhood, and we look forward to building positive relationships here." His quiet confidence, paired with the calm authority in his tone and posture, had a disarming effect. The neighbors' whispers died down, their posture slackening, unsure how to respond to someone who neither fought back nor appeared intimidated. By the end of the day, word had begun to spread quietly among the community. The Johnsons had not only moved in, but had done so with dignity, patience, and authority. A neighbor's passing remark, "Did you know they actually bought their houses?" floated through a few conversations, hinting at the growing awareness that the assumptions and subtle prejudices they had harbored were misplaced. Marcus and Lisa continued their evening routine inside their home, aware that their calm perseverance was already reshaping perceptions, teaching a lesson in respect, dignity, and the quiet strength of accomplishment that no amount of harassment could undermine. By the following week, the Johnsons had fully settled into their home and were navigating the neighborhood with quiet confidence. Each morning, Marcus and Lisa moved with purposeful calm, tending to the house, children, and yard, while subtly establishing a sense of presence that could not be ignored. The neighbors who had previously mocked or whispered about them began to sense that their assumptions were misplaced. Small gestures, a polite greeting from Marcus, a wave from Lisa, the children laughing freely in the yard, communicated composure, dignity, and confidence that were impossible to diminish through gossip or passive-aggressive comments. One afternoon, while Lisa supervised the children at the park, a few neighbors lingered nearby, their posture hesitant. They whispered to one another, their voices carrying traces of doubt and confusion. "Are they actually homeowners here?" one murmured. Another nodded reluctantly, glancing toward the laughing children and the calm, poised woman speaking with measured authority. The realization that the family had legally purchased their homes created an almost immediate shift in behavior. The casual arrogance and condescension that had fueled their harassment faltered, replaced with awkward silence and forced politeness. Back at the Johnsons' house, Marcus supervised the finishing touches on the garden and driveway, moving with meticulous precision and quiet authority. As a neighbor peeked over the fence, Marcus offered a brief nod and a polite greeting. The neighbor froze for a moment, unsure how to respond to the composed and accomplished man before them. Word began to spread through the neighborhood, subtle but undeniable. The family was not only present but fully entitled to their space, and the attempts to belittle or intimidate them were both ineffective and socially awkward. As evening descended, the Johnsons gathered in their living room, reflecting briefly on the day. They had faced subtle hostility and unwelcome curiosity, yet they had responded not with anger, confrontation, or defensiveness, but with composure, dignity, and calm authority. Their quiet confidence was reshaping the neighborhood dynamic, illustrating that ownership, respect, and personal achievement were not granted by social acceptance or convenience, but earned and maintained through perseverance, integrity, and self-assurance. Outside, the neighbors who had once whispered and smirked remained silent, a subtle acknowledgement that the Johnsons' presence could not be questioned or undermined, leaving the family to continue their lives in peace, strength, and quiet triumph. By midweek, the Johnsons had not only settled into their home, but had begun subtly influencing the neighborhood dynamic. Their quiet confidence and consistent composure created an unspoken authority that neighbors could neither challenge nor ignore. Morning greetings from Marcus and Lisa were met with awkward nods, whispered conversations ceased, and even the most vocal critics found themselves pausing before speaking, uncertain how to respond to the family's calm yet assertive presence. The children, unaware of the underlying tension, continued to play freely in the yard and at the park, their laughter and ease serving as an unintentional reminder of the family's rightful place in the community. Throughout the day, Marcus and Lisa moved about their property with meticulous attention, tending to tasks and maintaining a household that reflected both discipline and care. They exchanged polite words with passersby, each interaction reinforcing their legitimacy and subtly correcting assumptions. Some neighbors attempted to regain control of the social narrative through whispered judgments or thinly veiled critiques, but these attempts fell flat against the Johnsons' steady demeanor. The family's quiet confidence created a social gravity that reoriented the neighborhood, demonstrating that respect is earned through consistent behavior and dignity, rather than casual prejudice or outdated assumptions. Later, word began to circulate more broadly. The Johnsons had not rented or been gifted their home. They had legally purchased it, invested in it, and established themselves with all the rights and privileges any homeowner would possess. The realization created a ripple effect. Conversations that once carried judgment now became hesitant, their tone shifting from condescension to careful acknowledgement. Even the neighbors who had been the most outspoken in their mockery were reduced to silence, their assumptions overturned by the simple truth of ownership and the quiet power of composure. By evening, the Johnsons gathered on their porch, watching the sun set over Maplewood. They reflected on the week's progress, recognizing that their patient, dignified response to harassment had begun to reshape perceptions and behaviors. The neighborhood, once tense and judgmental, was gradually realigning around respect and acknowledgement, not forced, but earned through their calm authority and unwavering presence. For the Johnsons, each moment of composure was both a personal triumph and a quiet lesson to the community. Prejudice and assumption hold no power against integrity, achievement, and the quiet confidence of those who know their worth. By the following week, the Johnsons had fully established themselves in their home and within the neighborhood, their presence now commanding a quiet authority that could not be ignored. Marcus moved with purposeful calm through yard work and home maintenance, while Lisa guided the children with patience and discipline, reinforcing routines that mirrored the stability and strength of their household. The neighbors who had initially whispered, mocked, or smirked now observed from a distance, hesitant to intrude or judge, their earlier arrogance replaced with awkward restraint. The subtle power of consistent dignity and competence was reshaping the social dynamic, creating an environment where respect could no longer be denied or dismissed. Throughout the week, interactions between the Johnsons and their neighbors remained polite but measured. Marcus offered courteous greetings during brief encounters, and Lisa responded to passing nods with calm assurance. Each interaction reinforced the family's position, emphasizing that ownership, confidence, and composure could not be undermined by passive aggression or assumption. Even the most vocal critics hesitated to speak ill, realizing that their attempts at intimidation had no effect, and that any further harassment would only highlight their own insecurities. At the park, the Johnson children played freely while other neighbors watched, some with curiosity, others with reluctant acknowledgement. Marcus and Lisa's calm attention to both household and family set a standard that quietly commanded respect. Their behavior and diligence left an unmistakable impression, illustrating that authority and legitimacy were rooted in consistent, principled action rather than casual judgment or inherited assumptions. By the end of the day, whispers about ownership and accomplishments spread subtly through the neighborhood, leaving those who had initially harassed the family silently reconsidering their attitudes and behavior. As evening fell, the Johnsons gathered on their porch, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the lawn. They reflected on the week, noting how patience, composure, and quiet confidence had begun to transform the neighborhood dynamic. Their consistent, dignified presence had done more than establish their home. It had begun to teach a lesson in respect, accountability, and recognition of true achievement. Outside, the once bold neighbors remained muted, their initial mockery silenced not by confrontation, but by the undeniable strength and integrity of the Johnson family. By the end of the week, the Johnsons had fully solidified their place in the Maplewood neighborhood. Their presence, calm authority, and consistent composure had reshaped the social dynamic, leaving neighbors who had once whispered, mocked, or smirked in awkward silence. The truth of ownership and accomplishment was undeniable. Marcus and Lisa had earned every inch of their home, and their disciplined, dignified behavior commanded respect in ways that gossip and prejudice never could. The children's laughter, freely ringing through the yards and parks, symbolized not just the joy of the family, but the unshakable legitimacy of their place in the community. Throughout the week, the Johnsons interacted with neighbors politely but deliberately, offering greetings, small gestures of kindness, and quiet conversations that reinforced their composure. Any attempt by neighbors to belittle or intimidate them was met with polite acknowledgement and calm assurance, leaving the aggressors uncertain, their assumptions dismantled by simple dignity and steadfast presence. The knowledge that the family had legally purchased their homes further muted any attempts at hostility, creating a quiet social shift where respect, even if reluctant, replaced mockery. By evening, as Marcus and Lisa watched the children play on their lawn, they reflected on the transformation they had achieved without confrontation or hostility. Their patience, consistent composure, and quiet authority had not only protected their family and home, but had reshaped perceptions, teaching a lesson in humility and acknowledgement. The neighbors who had once harassed them were now largely silent, no longer daring to question their right to the space they had worked to secure. Maplewood, once tinged with subtle prejudice and whispered judgment, had begun to realign around respect, recognition, and the quiet power of integrity. As the sun set, casting warm light across the Johnsons' property, the family felt a sense of accomplishment far beyond the walls of their home. They had not only established themselves physically in the neighborhood, but had also demonstrated, through patience and unwavering dignity, that true authority and respect are earned through perseverance, composure, and achievement. Lessons that would resonate in the community long after they had unpacked their last box. The Johnsons had arrived, not with confrontation or anger, but with quiet strength, leaving a mark that prejudice could not erase, and teaching the neighborhood that silence in the face of undeniable truth is often the loudest acknowledgement of all.